Now let's look at whether you can have a logotype that doesn't have an icon. And the short answer to that is yes, of course you can. And I'm going to use two examples. The one on top is the logo that Syra made, and the one on the bottom is one of the ones that Seymour made. And I'm going to use these two to show you that you can in fact have logotypes that don't have icons and that work equally well. So let's start with the one that Syra made. Let me zoom in. Now, the typography of this is very nice, very well constructed. She's using Advent Pro. She's using the extra light weight for this byline here, which says organic products, and then for the word Natura, she's actually using the bold weight of Advent Pro. And the way that she's done it is, if I just put some guides here, she has aligned the top and the bottom of this byline exactly with the top of the top line and then the bottom of the third line. She's broken the word Natura into three lines, which sort of reminds me a little bit of this very beautiful logotype that Stefanel has, which is also broken into different lines. And then she's, in order to create this alignment, she's opened up the leading of these three lines, but that works really well as well. So because the areas that she has here in between the characters, the kernings and the leading, create an almost equal space, and then we have that here as well. So it's very well spaced, both horizontally and vertically. Everything is very well, nicely distributed. And then here she has this flower, and in my opinion this flower is too much, because this is such a well designed, well placed, balanced typographic work. Like it's really holistic in terms of typography. It works really well, that I think the flower actually becomes an excessive element. Now we could of course initially see whether there are other things we can do with this, maybe make it smaller. Would that work? It's certainly an improvement when it gets smaller, but I still think it's too much. Now, one thing we could try, which might work, is we could try to align it to the center here, to the central line, to this dash, and that might improve things a bit, but quite frankly I think if we get rid of it altogether, I think that'll be the best thing to do. So let me just move this to the center a bit. Now I think the only thing that it needs is it needs a separator, which would then create a very nice 90-degree contrast to this dash here. So I'm going to add that. Now in order to do that, I'm going to move the byline over a bit, and then I still have the guides. Let me just go to the line tool, and I have it set at 3 pixels, which should be okay. And let's go. Hang on. What happened? What happened to my... I think... Hold on, actually. I think I made a mistake. I made the stroke transparent. It should be... there should be a color here. So this may actually be too thin. Or too thick, sorry. So I'm going to reduce this to 2, or maybe even 1. Yeah, I think that's going to work better. Nope. 2 should be fine. So let me move that out a bit. And because we're in Photoshop, as I'm moving it, you can sometimes see it sort of disappear a little bit. That's because we're in a bitmap medium, but actually when we go to 100 %, which is the actual size, then you will see that everything is just fine. So that's the first one. Now, this is a perpendicular logotype, so it's working on a vertical axis and not a horizontal axis. So when it comes to putting this on a website header, there may be problems because that's a vertical horizontal format, and it might be difficult to put this logotype in there in its vertical form. But I have a few solutions for that, so when we get to that point we will deal with those. But for now, this, I think, the way that it's looking right now, is pretty much done. So now let us go to Seymour's, which he already conceived of as a logotype that is supposed to not have an icon. The mistake he made is that he picked the wrong font. Now, he picked a stencil font, which in and of itself, there could be a way of using stencil fonts or broken fonts for a project that revolves around a company that sells natural products, but not this particular one, because this is a very heavy one. And what these kinds of fonts remind us of, they're strong fonts, they have strong emotional associations, and in this particular case, the association is the military or industrial things. So if we do a search on Google for stencil font usage, we will already even see that there are special searches for military or industrial, and then when we look at all of these, it's things like precious cargo, fragile, or Doc 51, or gas mask, or things like that. So it's obvious that these kinds of fonts have a particular kind of connotation. So how would we find one that's a good one to use for Natura? Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to duplicate this, which I just do by dragging it over this plus sign, so that we have the original as the reference. And let me just say a few more things about this font, which is why it wouldn't be suitable. These cut-off corners, they also give this font an extra hardness, an extra kind of military or industrial look. And then also, when we look at the R here, this R is really problematic because it isn't really a stencil. It's just that they took the stem of the R and put it inside the designers of this font, or the designer of this font, and put it inside this area here, and then he gets a negative space, which is not like a nice cut-off line like these, but is just this really strange looking trapezoid, which looks like a mistake, which actually I'm pretty sure that it is. So now let's go to this one here. This is the one that we're going to modify. So I already have quite a few stencil fonts in my computer, and I've put them into font base here. I have 66, it seems, because I like them myself. I think they're great, but you have to be careful in how you use them, and I've activated a number of them. So let's start with this one here. It's called Andarillo. It's a lightweight font, which is not really so much a stencil font, but more a broken font. So let's see how that's going to work. And Andarillo. There we go. Oh, and I'm going to center this so that it's easier to align. So that would be our version 1. Now, this can probably get bigger so that it fills the box more nicely. And the box itself can probably get wider, like so. And then this gets more centered. So here we have version 1. Now let's move this down and see what else we have here. I have this one here, but I have a better one, which is a serif stencil font, or a broken font, which is this one right here, Butler stencil. So let's try that one. Butler stencil light, ultralight, regular, medium, bold, black. Now all of these would be too heavy in my opinion. They would again make us go back a little bit to that industrial thing. But if we stay with the ultralight, or the light, but I'm gonna say the light, ultralight, then, and now we need to make it a bit smaller, because one thing about fonts that you need to know is that even at the same point size, they will not always be the same size. So here we have version 2. Let's duplicate it again. And see what else we have here. This here, college stencil, I think would work better in lowercase. I'm going to, well, let's try it. Let's not. Wait. We have one here called Elena Regular, which is kind of like a play on a serif broken font. However, the R here looks a bit problematic. I'm not sure how well this will work out, but let's give it a try. Probably not my favorite because of this R. Because of the way, okay, if I zoom in here, look here, they've managed to do a nice round thing here with this serif tip, but here we suddenly have something that is broken. So if you were to insist on using this, then I would probably advise you to rasterize this and then to actually take this part here and then paste it onto here. So in other words, make a new tip for the R out of the A, which would be an awful lot of work, which would probably not be worth it. There's one here called Fine Stencil. I'm going to do that one just to show you why I wouldn't use it. Fine Stencil. There we go. Now I wouldn't use this because of how high these here, the horizontal strokes of the A and the R are. Also, it's kind of like jaggedy, which would be another reason, but my main reason would be this sort of strange height that the horizontal strokes have. But the one below it, Gardenfreude, is one that I think I would definitely use. Now let's see what else we've got here. We have this here, which looks like a very nice font, except I'm going to try it, but it looks a little bit too geometric. It looks a little bit too much like as if it might be good for an architectural firm or something like that. But let's just do it to see what result we get. So what was it called again? Rocket Wildness. Wow. Yeah, it's a very nice font. However, I am not sure that it is suited for Natura, because it really does look a little bit too much like the kind of font that we would use for the logotype of, say, a design firm or an architectural firm or something like that, with this diagonal stroke of the R, which is actually very pretty, but it gives us too much of a feeling of design, of architecture and things like that. So now let's look at all of them together to decide which one would be the best suited. Now, with the exception of this one, all of them are lightweights, and that, even though some of them are stencil fonts, mostly they are actually broken fonts rather than stencil fonts, they take it out of that domain of, oops, I already closed that, out of that military or industrial feeling. They become much more elegant. This one I would probably not use. So let's close this one. Again, it's for the same reason. It looks a bit too industrial. It looks a bit too military because of the boldness, because of the bold nature. Now, one thing, when you have a logotype like this, and it doesn't have an icon, or it could have an icon that is very neutral, then one of the good things is that you don't really have sex here. You know, this is not, it's a company for natural products, but it doesn't really appeal more to men or more to women. It's much more neutral. It's much more gender neutral. So that would be a big advantage in having a logotype like this. Now, looking again, I would probably either go with this one or this one here, and probably this one here, because this is actually the most neutral. Here, you know, not so much as we have here. Here we really have a very strong architectural reference, but here we kind of have a strong geometric reference as well. But with this one we don't. It's a perfectly straightforward font, which doesn't have associations as such, so it can be used for something like Natura as well. But then this one here would also work quite well. Now the difference would be between this and this would be, now if Natura was more of an upmarket brand, you know, more expensive, then I would probably go with this one. If it was more you know, youth oriented or cheaper, you know, like, let's say, like L'Oreal, for example, then this one would be more appropriate. But if it was something like Clinique, an expensive brand, then this one would probably be more appropriate because it's much more elegant. And again, with these two there would be an age factor. This would appeal to more of a young crowd of users, and this would appeal to a more mature crowd of users. But it could be one or the other. Both of them, I think, would work, depending on your demographic profile of the anticipated users of your product. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial for logotypes without icons. So let me just zoom out so that we see everything together. So we have Natura here, and Natura is this one here, Cyrus here, actually is very neutral because of the font that she chose, which is an adaptable font, a highly adaptable font. These aren't that adaptable. They have more of a fancy nature. So this would appeal to any demographic, old, young, whatever. You could use that for across the board. Here you would have to think about the demographic of your user group. Okay, I'll see you later.